morning, and you are very welcome to today's CBI webinar. My name is Kerry Thomas. I'm an editor at a new startup called Tortoise, and it's a great pleasure, as ever, to be doing these events in conjunction with the CBI. Particularly at the moment, I think, because it feels to me that we are living through quite momentous weeks at the moment. That question that's been at the heart of national life since the coronavirus struck about the balance between the threat to public health and the threat to the economy, that feels particularly sort of vivid at the moment. So since we were here last Monday, we've had the announcement from the Prime Minister about further lockdown measures, the advice to work from home if you can, and the closure of pubs and restaurants at 10 o'clock. And then on Thursday, we had the winter package of economic measures from the Chancellor, and the cancellation of the autumn budget. So a hugely significant package of measures there that I'm sure we're going to spend quite a bit of time on this call talking about. If we look around, there's a degree of chaos, potentially predictable chaos in universities, and more local lockdowns coming in on top of the national measures in places like Cardiff and Swansea and elsewhere, so that between a quarter and a third of all the people in the country now are living under some sort of additional lockdown measures. So given all that, I think I am in need of some calm judgments and measured assessments of where we stand this morning. So it's great to have with us the CBI's Director General, Carolyn Fairbairn, and the CBI's Chief UK Policy Director, Matthew Fell. As ever, before I turn to Carolyn and Matthew, the great thing about this call is the questions that we get from you. So you probably know the drill by now, but just in case, there's a button on your screen that says questions. Do send them in, questions, comments, experiences that you've had. We'll turn to as many as we can in the course of the next 45 minutes. Those that we can't, the CBI will try and address later on. And if you want to submit something anonymously, all you have to do is write anon, A-N-O-N, at the top of the question or comment, and we will treat that confidentially, of course. But we've got a tremendous amount of things to cover this morning, so let's tuck straight in. Carolyn, good morning to you.
Good morning, Kerry.
Let's pick up, shall we? Let's start with that package of economic measures that the Chancellor announced last Thursday. Can you give us your reaction to it, the reaction you've heard from around the place to that big package?
Absolutely. Well, you know, morning, Kerry, morning, everybody on the call. And as you say, really momentous week. Quite fragile in many ways, but with a very big package of measures from the Chancellor last Thursday. And you'll remember that we've been talking on this call about the absolutely desperate need for a successor to the job retention scheme, more packages of support around the loans. We've been pretty vocal on all of that. And the puff of white smoke came last Wednesday with his delivering it in Parliament on Thursday. And just to run through the headline, people have probably followed them, but there was, at the centrepiece, there was a successor scheme to the JRS, now called the JSS, the Job Support Scheme, that is very much focused on firms that are in the process of reopening. So it has many of the characteristics of the JRS. But it follows on from the partial furloughing system. But you need to, as an employer, bring your workers back at least 33% of hours, and then there is a subsidy from the government split with employers, and actually the employee makes a contribution as well. It's a big change. It's a less generous package and a more targeted package than the JRS. So I'll come back to the reactions of business in a moment. But you know, an important intervention, given that he has said he wouldn't extend JRS. But around all of that, equally importantly, I think, Kerry, there were some important announcements around the loan schemes. So the extension of the CBILS loans and the bounce back loans to 10-year terms, a very welcome reduction, ongoing reduction in VAT for hospitality firms from 20% to 5%, extending into the spring of next year, and a really big thing actually, which we had called for, which was more help on VAT. That lump sum payment now can be spread over £38 billion, can be spread over 12 months. So it was in the round a big package of measures. The reaction, I think, has been pretty favourable. We, on balance, supported the package as something which recognised the importance of creating a sustainable sort of fiscal picture alongside supporting businesses. And I think it is particularly good for firms who have trained people who they really want to retain because they have belief that their business is going to come back. I think where it is tougher, much tougher, is if you are completely closed or if you are now facing new restrictions and new, we might come on to it, the hospitality constraints around the 10 p.m. curfew, for example. It is really tough for those businesses, which is why the VAT measures were, I think, particularly welcome. So in the round, Kerry, a big statement and a big intervention by the Chancellor. It won't help every firm and it won't save every job. But our view as the CBI, and we're hearing it strongly from members, is it will protect jobs as we head into this difficult autumn.
Okay, Karen, let me just jump to Matthew, because I think the other big theme is the lockdowns and the other measures there that were announced. So why don't we just get a quick overview from those from you, Matthew, before we then we've already got a bunch of questions coming in. So just talk us through the new restrictions and how you're feeling as the dust settles on those.
Yeah, thanks, Kerry, and good morning, everyone. As you say, Kerry, we did get a range of new restrictions coming in last week, both a combination of national restrictions and then something of a flurry of new local lockdowns as well. So in total, as you mentioned at the top, something like 1 in 4 of the population now under some form of restriction, whether it be national or local. There is obviously variation within those local lockdowns, and particularly within the devolved nations as well. I think the first thing to say is actually we were really, although hugely disappointed and frustrated at the new restrictions, really important to underscore this was not a return to the full-scale national lockdown that we saw back in March, which would have been even more economically damaging. So that's the sort of glass half full view. But the new measures, I think perhaps most striking, a return to the work from home if you can guidance, and even more so the suggestion that that could last for as long as 6 months from the Prime Minister. Then those more targeted measures at certain sectors. So in hospitality, for example, table-only services in pubs, bars, restaurants, that 10 p.m. curfew there, and more requirements for face coverings in particular settings, staff in retail, indoor hospitality, users of taxis, private hire vehicles, and so on. So a range of new measures coming in place there. And then at the local level, that variation, and particularly in parts of Wales, Caerphilly, Bridgend, Merthyr Tydfil, restrictions you may not enter or leave the area without really good reason, for example, through to bans on household socialising and so on. So quite a range of different measures for firms to get their heads around, some of them impacting more on domestic settings, but others spilling into the workforce as well. And then we saw updated tail end of Friday, actually, new guidance from the government on how firms should go about interpreting all of these new measures. And we can get into some of the detail on that as well, Kerry, through the call.
Okay, we certainly will. But Karen, let me come back to you.
Sure.
On the sort of practicalities or the sort of incentives within the JSS, the Job Support Scheme. Yeah. As you say, this is aimed at companies that are firms that are reopening. As those companies are feeling their way through a sort of an economy that is changing quite fast and unpredictably, if an employer can see enough work for one person in his or her operation, that's in the end the incentive seems to be that they're going to give a job to one person and not employ a number of people on these part-time things, because the costs don't add up for them to employ 3 people on part-time contracts when they can employ one person on a full-time contract. So I wonder how effective you think this scheme will be in containing unemployment, I suppose.
So we think it will be effective for quite a lot of firms. So we've had quite a lot of feedback. So if I give you, this is particularly for firms, as I say, who have been trying to keep their staff. So they've got them on furlough now, for example, and they haven't made them redundant because they value those particular people. And it's very interesting. I've had quite a lot of emails over the weekend from firms who really welcome this because, one example is a firm that makes energy equipment, sustainable energy equipment, but they haven't been able to install it in smart metering. They haven't been able to install it in people's homes because they can't go in because of the furlough, because of the COVID restrictions. They do see a future in those jobs. They are highly trained. This CEO was going to have to make most of them redundant at the end of October. It is now going to be able to keep most of them on because the cost of those people is now 55% of what it would have been on 100% salary. So that is the kind of example where I think you're going to see some really, a lot of saved jobs. But for others, that calculation around part-time versus full-time, they may well make that calculation. But this is particularly, I think, for companies where they value those particular individuals, and that's why they have kept them on furlough for so long.
Yeah, Kerry, if I could just jump in, the other scenario that I've heard a lot of people talk about is particularly for small and medium-sized enterprises, where there's only sort of one person to do a job or one person to do the particular skill. So actually you do need those range of people, whether they're sort of helping with the IT or they're a marketing expert or wherever it might happen to be. You haven't got a pool of people there in those sort of size of companies. So you need to hang on to that core skill capability, but aren't able to sort of bring them back full-time yet throughout the entire working week. And I think that's another sort of scenario where this kind of intervention will help those firms.
One thing I think I would add, Kerry, and I think it's a really important point, is that for the kind of firms where it doesn't help, there may need to be more. And I've been very clear in terms of my conversations with the Chancellor. He's been actually, I think, very good at evolving schemes over time, and particularly with these extra restrictions coming in, I doubt very much that this is the end of the road in terms of business support.
Yeah, because as you were saying before, I mean, there is sectoral support for some of the badly affected industries like hospitality through VAT measures, for example, but there isn't specific sectoral support through the job support scheme. But you think it's worth keeping lobbying for something that targets particular sectors in that way as well?
I think we have seen that, and the answer is yes. So, the creative industries package, 1.57 billion, really, really valuable. The hospitality package, Eat Out to help out to eat out, the VAT reduction, which is hospitality specific. There will almost certainly be more measures needed there. I think the fact this isn't this scheme, the Chancellor was very resistant to anything sectoral in terms of a job retention scheme successor. And there is actually good reason for that, because it is quite difficult, very difficult, in fact, to identify the whole value chain going through a particular sector. So, the food suppliers into hospitality, you can tend to miss those, and they have been missed through the sectoral support. So we do support the fact that this has been designed without specific sector support, but you do then need it potentially in other ways. Although I have to say, in terms of my conversations with hospitality members, one of the things that they are most concerned about are the restrictions and how evidence-based they are, and how challenging they are. That 10 p.m. curfew is turning out to be extremely damaging to hospitality businesses. And actually, that in many ways is the most valuable thing that could happen now, is that those restrictions should be put in a properly evidence-based context.
Yeah, and Matthew, on that point, we know that the advice to close down pubs and restaurants at 10 p.m. didn't come from Sage, that it was a government policy rather than one that came from the scientific advisors. What are the risks of that kind of approach, given what Carolyn said about the need for an evidence base behind these really important policies?
Yeah, I think on that, Kerry, the really important thing is just to sort of bring people with you. We know all of these restrictions are dependent on members of the public just doing the right thing, abiding by the restrictions, and that means they need to sort of buy into it and have real belief that those sacrifices and abiding by those restrictions are making a real difference. So as Carolyn was said, there's real value actually in showing your workings in the margins so that people can see what is really making a difference. And that means that both businesses and individuals are then much more likely to buy into it. So I think that's what we would urge, is a sort of full transparency of these measures. That's how you get maximum commitment to them, and we really focus on what makes a difference.
Yeah, I can see, by the way, in the questions that we've got quite a few coming in about Brexit. So rest assured, we are going to come to that during the course of this conversation. But we'll just do a little more on the job support scheme and lockdown measures before we get there. Carolyn, I think the Chancellor accepts we can all see that we are going to see a rise in unemployment now over the next few months. No one quite knows to what extent. But one thing the Chancellor didn't mention in his statement last week was training. Or retraining, how significant a part of the jigsaw is that going to be?
Well, it has to be a huge part of the jigsaw. And actually, interestingly, I did go in and meet the Chancellor just before his announcement, and there was a photo afterwards. I wasn't entirely expecting, but the thing we talked about was retraining, because it isn't in the JSS. There was some, I think they did consider. The Treasury did consider having a retraining requirement in the JSS. But I think because it is such a big change coming out of the job retention scheme, they decided against it. It would have been an extra hurdle, if you like. But there does need to be a really big turbocharging around retraining. What we're seeing is the economy shifting shape before our eyes, with new jobs being created in some areas and some regions of the country and jobs being lost in other regions. We've talked about the real pain facing city centres. There is going to be unemployment in our city centres without a doubt. And how we retrain and enable people of all ages, but particularly young people, to be able to get into those new sectors is going to be vital. So one of the things that I offered to the Chancellor last week with Francis O'Grady is a renewed effort and commitment from business, working with government and the unions, to really get a turbocharged retraining programme up and running.
And when you talk about retraining, give us an insight into that conversation. What kind of things are you talking about? National, regional? What's the sort of mix of things that you think are interesting?
I think it could be quite a broad mix. One of the what are the kind of skills that we need? I think that's where you start. And I think we know that digital skills, technical skills, engineering skills. We've got 26 million boilers to retrofit to meet our net zero targets. These are all jobs that require technical skills. And what we have seen during the pandemic is all our FE colleges go online and provide digital courses in a really imaginative way. So how about having a really powerful partnership between FE colleges, business and local government to adapt those courses to the needs of the local community? And these are low-cost courses. They can be done in conjunction with COVID restrictions, and we could have thousands and thousands of people signed up to them. So that is just one idea, and that could happen in some of the downtime hours that people are not working as a result of the JSS. So that's one idea, but I think there could be many others along the way.
Okay, before I turn to Matthew on lockdown things, Carolyn, we've had a question in about business rates relief. Someone wondering if there's any update there. Is anything in the weeds there that we should know about?
Well, a subject very close to our heart. So we really pushed hard for more business rates relief, and actually it was a disappointment I had in the package, and I did say so to the Chancellor. And you'll see in our statements we've said that not enough has been done on business rates relief. It has been the #1 thing that many firms have said to us would make a big difference. It has helped hugely so far, and so we are continuing to push very hard. And actually, if there's anybody on the call who could help us with specific examples of how this particular measure would really help their business right now, the timing for that would be really good. Because although there isn't a budget, I mean, you mentioned that, Kerry, and that is a real disappointment. We think that is a missed opportunity. There is nothing to stop the Chancellor from announcing new business rates relief, and we hope he will.
Great. Okay. Matthew, let's just turn back to the question of lockdown. It does look as if we are in this sort of kaleidoscope of measures that we can now see around the country that's changing every few days. It does look as if we're in this kind of situation for a relatively long haul now, doesn't it?
Yes, I think the expectations were set by the Prime Minister in saying this could last for as long as 6 months, for example, for the new restrictions that were imposed nationally, particularly around guidance on working from home and local lockdowns. It's one of the reasons we spent so much time earlier in the summer, if you recall, Kerry, saying we just need to get really good at local lockdowns, because whilst we hope there won't be a whole lot more of them, the reality is they are likely to play an important part through the autumn. So really important we get good at them. But the other bit, I think, Kerry, is how we face into some of these restrictions. And it was interesting, I was talking to the business department at Bayes at the tail end of last week. They have, if people have not noticed, updated their online guidance to take into account these new restrictions. And the one I think that's really important, particularly for office-based workers, is the detail of that guidance says office workers who can work effectively from home should do so over the winter. And when I pushed them on that, I said to them, there are a number of individuals for this is clearly working very well and that should continue, but also there are many, many people who have got challenging, difficult living conditions at home. Many are struggling with a sense of isolation and mental health challenges. And the reality is there are from time to time certain activities that just lend themselves to in-person, whether that be collaboration, problem solving, bringing teams together to maintain that sort of culture and sense of purpose and so on. And that is why that guidance was deliberately drafted in that way. So it does give firms a range of flexibilities there to be able to interpret in that way. So the majority who can effectively work from home will continue to do so for a period, but also those that fall into some of those categories that I just defined, there is that flexibility to bring people together in targeted ways from time to time. So that is really helpful flexibility. And when I was on a number of calls at the back end of last week, I spoke to CBI members in the Northwest, for example. We had a number of HR directors coming together with our employment board and so on. That, I think, has been the response from many firms. There has obviously been a pause in the big push to get people back to office in accordance with the guidelines, but lots of businesses saying, thinking about those particular situations, they're very alive to it based on individual need. They're going to approach that in a really flexible manner in line with what the guidance now says.
Yeah, and Matthew, what are you hearing from those same businesses about testing? Because that's such a huge part of a solution, isn't it? What's your impression of the progress that's being made, the blockages that are still there, the time it's taking to get tests and so on?
Yeah, I think, Kerry, you're right. I mean, we do see testing as such an important part of the solution to this, so that people are able to travel, get to work, get out and about, move around with confidence if we have testing put in place. I think businesses really do see this as an important part of the mix. And the thing that we want to see really is just this big national push to get both government and business working, absolutely doing everything possible to maximize the supply of testing. That seems to be the big thing at the moment. Can we alleviate those pinch points when people get in touch, the availability of testing, the speed in which we can get responses? Because I think that's the bit where companies are finding that frustrating. If people are having to either wait to get a test or then waiting on the outcome of that test, knowing that they could potentially get back to work, but they're having to just sit on their hands while they wait for that result. So the solution to that is to really have a big push on the supply at all points in the chain so that we can get that working as rapidly as possible and get mass testing available to everybody.
And Caroline, staying with that theme of how government and business can work together to make things function, for the benefit of all of us, I note that additional £500 support for people in lockdown comes into force today to help them adhere to local lockdown conditions. What's business's view on that? Is that enough to support people to comply with local measures?
Well, we will see. I mean, we have been long supporters of providing effectively some version of statutory sick pay, something which actually enables people to stay at home and continue to have enough to live on. So we'll see. It's better than it was, but I think we have to keep a really close eye on it. We've now got a mix now of carrots and sticks. I mean, the fines have also come in, which are fairly heavy, but I think it does all come back to what Matthew was saying earlier. You need the support in place. You probably do need some kind of sanction if you break the rules, but you need to bring people with you, and that kind of sense of we're in it together and we trust the advice that we're given. Transparency in that, I think, is what we will be urging the government to really work on as the restrictions change.
And what's been the resistance in the Treasury to some sort of statutory sick pay? Because it does seem appropriate to the sort of untrained eye like mine.
Yes, I mean, Matthew's been sort of on the case on this really right from the beginning, and may have something to add. I think it is public finances. And that's a legitimate concern, right? I mean, we went through a 2 trillion ceiling on public debt, but there is, I think, that sort of short-term, long-term question about how we control the virus if you haven't got the right incentives in place for people. But Matthew, do you have more insight on the?
Well, I mean, I think that obviously is the sort of governing thought. This isn't a bottomless pit. We're all wise enough to know that. I think, Kerry, the bit why we are really pushing this, though, is it seems to me, of course, you want a tapering of support, and that gets less generous over time, designed for situations where the economy is gradually beginning to reopen again. That makes complete sense. But in situations where it is the government telling you either to an individual or to business, you can't work for a particular reason, that is where we are pushing the logic to say you ought to be supported in those cases through more generous support measures, because what you don't want to do is then have a financial disincentive to do the right thing. That is what we really think is really critical. So getting the level calibrated properly to provide that right level of incentive and so on to do the right thing, that is where I think we need to get to.
Right, okay. Karen, let's turn to Brexit, because we've had a number of questions in on that topic, and it's clearly a very important week. Can you just give us a view from your vantage point about how you think things are looking just now?
Absolutely, Kerry. So critical week, the final week of negotiations, the 9th round. There won't be any more negotiations after this. And now we're really looking to the council meeting in the middle of October, October the 15th and 16th. So this is absolutely critical. I do think that there is some cause for optimism in terms of what we are hearing, and I'm hearing it privately as well as publicly. I think just a recognition on all sides about how deeply damaging it would be not to reach an agreement. And actually this kind of understanding which we have been really trying to inform, which is it may on paper look as though there's not that much difference between what people call a skinny deal and no deal. Actually, it is a massive difference, because it is only with a deal that you have the chance to build back with a strong services chapter, with a strong people chapter, all of the things that we fear will be missing. And I think that is now really well understood, actually, in our government. And I had a long conversation with some of the key members of the European Council, very senior members last week, and I got a strong sense it was understood there as well. The two issues remain fisheries and state aid. Neither are simple, but both do have a way through if there is a will. I think that we are looking this week to this idea of going into the so-called tunnel, which would be this sort of expression for when both sides actually disappear and try and negotiate the fine print. It was last done in the run-up to Theresa May's deal. And if so, I think that we should have, I think, some cause for hope. What I would say, though, Kerry, and I think it's a really important point given where we are now, is that whatever happens, I think this deal is not going to be everything that businesses want it to be. It's really, really not. I think it will primarily be about goods, probably. I think we can hope for tariff and quota free, but there won't be enough on services. There won't be enough on professional qualifications. There may well not be enough on data. So we need to keep on arguing on those things, but crucially, businesses need to be preparing for a deal. They need to be preparing for a deal. And so we have our transition hub up and running to help members sort of navigate that. But that is where I think best case is taking us to. It's a fairly thin deal, but I'm cautiously hopeful that that can be done, and where there's a will, there's a way.
And the difference from your perspective between a skinny deal and no deal is that with a skinny deal, there's enormous friction in the system. We probably have Kent full of lorries, and sorry, with no deal we have that, and with the skinny deal, that kind of obvious day-to-day trade can continue more or less as is.
I think it's still quite challenging, even under a skinny deal. What you get under a skinny deal, gosh, I mean, it's crystal ball territory here, right? But I think I'm always looking at the feasibility of the time available. I think skinny deal is it's tariff and quota free. So, you know, one of the big concerns was that food prices would go up, and I think, you know, if we can, and just-in-time value chains would be hugely affected. The automotive industry would be very badly affected by tariffs. I think a skinny deal could solve that, but there still will be paperwork at borders. There will be paperwork at borders that have not been done before. You know, we've said for I feel it's years now that there are 200,000 businesses in the UK, mostly small ones, who've only ever traded with the European Union, and so don't have the systems to, you know, deal with rules of origin and other customs checks. So there could still be challenges at borders, and that's the kind of thing that businesses will be urging and supporting members to get ready for. But crucially, there's this, I think, very big point about what it gives us as a basis to build from. You know, I think it would be extremely acrimonious. I think chaos is not too strong a word if we have no deal. If we have a deal, we can build back to something stronger over the course of the next year and beyond.
Yeah, that does feel very important. We had a question, Karen, about on the service sector.
Yeah.
So this is from someone anonymously asking, he or she has been asked by a client to deliver safety training in the Netherlands and Belgium, would have to quarantine for 10 days, the paid work is only 2 days. Is there any further update on the horizon on the service sector measure to enable work to be carried out across Europe as that company would need?
There are kind of two layers of this, aren't there? There is the Brexit layer and there's the COVID layer. And when you get them coming together, you do worry that our economy is going to be frozen in terms of people moving. So on the quarantine side, I think, as you know, we are very strong advocates of airport testing and making quarantine measures less punitive. So we will carry on our work there. It's tough given the testing is in such short supply, but we will continue to make that case, particularly on trial form. On the mobility of labour across borders, that is something we would like to be in the skinny deal, because we know how many people actually move across borders, even in this remote world that we're in, to fix machinery or to hold face-to-face meetings that can only happen face-to-face. So we're working on that. It is something that could come into a skinny deal. And if it doesn't, I mean, gosh, we'll have to work on it next year. But we absolutely understand the point. And one of the things that I am, frankly, hugely disappointed about is that I fear we are not going to make as much progress as we wanted to on services. The CBI has been talking up our services sector right from the beginning and emphasising its importance in all of this. And just, I think, to reassure members on the call, although what they may hear is a lot about goods over the next few weeks, we are absolutely making the case for services, a trade deal as well, and particularly this point about people moving. We absolutely hear you.
Yeah, Kerry, just to add on the COVID bits of that, if I may. Those people on the call might have heard Dido Harding speak out last week to say, of course, there is not a sort of magic bullet that you can get a single test when you return through an airport and that sort of guarantees you're okay. But I think what we are advocating is if you do use a testing regime to test on arrival, and then after a certain number of days, you can then significantly shrink the quarantine period. And that's what we have been advocating with them in contact with Grant Crapps, the Transport Secretary, and so on. So we do think there is a way that we can significantly slicken up that process, even if we can't eradicate the need for quarantining altogether.
Okay, that's really useful. Carolyn, let me come back to you again for an insight into the sort of your conversations with government, because as we've sort of said, that you can see the imperative for the government to avoid queues in Kent and the sort of chaos that you know, those kind of things can live in people's minds for a long time. So there's a very obvious political imperative to avoid that kind of obvious chaos. Does government, do you think, agree with you that a skinny deal would be the baseline for some then rapid improvements that would address some of the other measures, like the service sector question we've just had?
I believe so. I would be able to give you a better answer when I've got a private meeting coming up with Michael Gove and I will. I mean, it's one of the things that I want to have a private conversation with him on this. I believe so. I mean, it is interesting. If you look at previous statements that have been made by the government over time, it is about the value of being able to create something stronger over time. I'm hopeful of that, and actually, I think one of the things, if you look at the kind of trade deals that the UK is striking around the world, the Japan deal and the US deal, they are both setting the bar very high on services. I mean, the Japan deal has a very strong financial services chapter in it, and it has got, you know, strong data provision chapters in it. So we are setting those kind of standards elsewhere, and I think that's one of the things that we can help to support on. Actually, we've just been reappointed the CBI to the Strategic Trade Advisory Group, chaired by Liz Truss, and I'm attending that on Thursday of this week. And it's one of the things we're going to talk about. You know, what are really good trade deals for the UK, and the European Union has to be one of them. We will be continuing to make that case.
Okay, and Matthew, I can feel the sort of frustration coming in the questions about how am I supposed to prepare for this scenario, which is really, you know, staring us in the face, and a certain sense that it's almost impossible to prepare. But what's your advice to firms about whether there is actually preparation that they can do at this stage with all the uncertainty we're facing?
Yeah, I think that's right, Kerry. I mean, I think that frustration has spilled out in, Karen referred to it, the fact that firms have felt they've almost been sort of on pause or sliding backwards through a combination of having to divert all their energies to COVID on the one hand, and then not having the detail and the clarity with which to work through. I think the best advice, and Carolyn mentioned it, on our transition hub available on the website, just to think about the different situations and scenarios you're going to be in as a company, whether it be goods, services, moving people around and so on, importing parts of your supply chain, just to work through the logical steps. And of course, we're still in this deal, skinny deal, no deal conundrum, but actually the questions and the issues that you need to work with, those are probably the same starting points throughout, and you just need to then make sure you're across all the different ways in which it pinches on your business. So that would be my best advice to companies, would be think about all the practical steps that you physically have to go through, and then think about how you prepare against each of those scenarios or processes.
And if I can just add, Kerry, I mean, I've got I think this is incredibly hard for so many businesses doing this, and we have been, I think, informing government about how difficult it is. But I do think that, as Matthew says, there are some no regrets things that businesses can do now, because they will happen whatever the deal. And I think that, as Matthew says, they're on our website. Checks at borders are inevitable, and the paperwork that you will need as an exporter is pretty inevitable. And those are things that can be prepared for now. Then there's an unknown category, you know, the known unknowns, which are, will I have tariffs? Will there be quotas? And that may only come next month or even beyond. But there are no regrets things that can be done now, and we do urge businesses to do them, and we will provide whatever support we can.
And Carolyn, it's tempting to get a little world weary given everything that's happened and think that no deadline is ever really a deadline. But does this mid-October deadline look like a real thing to you?
I think it is a real deadline. One of the things that 3 cabinet ministers have said to me recently is we can't let this go on till December like we did last time. You know, there is that sense of the run up to Christmas and that memory we all have of that countdown being so debilitating, and particularly this year with COVID. So I think that is real. I spoke to someone, as I say, very senior in the European Council on Friday, who made the same point. I think there is a real recognition that this is last chance saloon. So we will know. I honestly think we will know by the middle of next month, end of next month. Latest. We've got Macron, Merkel saying that they are really going to engage at that point as well. They are hugely important to all of this. We do know that many German businesses are very aware of the unemployment risk to them of this. And there was a report out yesterday from one of the leading German business organisations on that. This is very much mutually felt now. So I think that is a deadline. I mean, I thought you were going to ask me something else, actually, which is the fact that quite a lot of businesses do assume there's going to be another transition period or an extension to the transition period. I do not think we can assume that. I would really, there may be something at the 11th hour that looks like a bit of an implementation period, but I've listened to both sides on this now. And I think this idea that we can't have another extension to the transition is very real.
Okay, Matthew, let me see if you can help with a question that's come in. It's quite a specific one, but it's asked whether the CBI is doing any work on the government's announcement that it intends to abolish tax-free spending for all international visitors from the 1st of January 2021. This person worried about the effect on international visitors. Is that an area that the CBI is engaged in?
It has come through, actually, Kerry, and if the person who's put the question in wants to follow up offline, our economics and tax team are on the case with this. We've had it come through in the last week or 10 days from a few different sources and businesses, so absolutely on the radar screen. Yeah, and Kerry, whilst I'm sort of inviting follow-ups and so on, at the risk of busting my inbox, I think, going right back to where we started today. We know on the job support scheme, the government are working right now on more detailed guidance, and we're helping them with that in a similar way we did when the JRS first came into being. The sort of questions that we're fielding around, firstly, just when is this guidance going to be available? There's a set of things around defining large businesses and what the sort of the gateway is in terms of impact, whether on turnover and so on. And also, is it going to be the same process of agreeing with your employees as per the JRS? If people have got other questions on those that they would like the guidance to cover off, please do get in touch, because we're feeding those through sort of right now in real time. And then the second sort of ask would be, again, help us specify for those companies who feel that the JSS isn't sufficient for them, whether it be the live events industries, creative industries, hospitality and so on. Again, making really clear what is the thing that makes the biggest difference for you would be enormously helpful as we help to hone down and specify that additional support above and beyond what has already been announced too. So a couple of invitations there to follow up if people are able to do that.
I'm sure they will. Carolyn, normally at this stage on a Monday morning, we ask you what else is on the CBI's agenda this week, I think, but have we covered everything? Is there anything else that we haven't touched on?
There's just one other thing I wanted to mention, which is that there is still going to be a spending review, and the Chancellor is going to be announcing what he's going to be spending his money on. And although it's quite hard to kind of pivot onto that, just to say that the CBI has been taking a lot of evidence from businesses about what matters, and we've got quite an ambitious set of sort of requests around a green recovery, around investment in hydrogen, around investment in EV charging points, around ongoing support for R&D to get the economy moving and creating jobs. And another big leg of that is retraining. So I just wanted to let people know that that is there, and we're going to be talking to the Chancellor about the forward-facing, longer-term agenda, as well about managing this. And again, to Matthew's point, if anybody has anything they would like us to particularly emphasise, it's a good time to do that. We'd love to hear from you.
Okie doke. Before we go, just to mention that there's this webinar back on Wednesday, and on Thursday the CBI is hosting an SME webinar on how the LEP network and help businesses improve their skills base. That's on Thursday at 10 AM. Details as ever on the website, so do sign up for that one, please. But for now, Matthew, Carolyn, thank you both very much. It's been fascinating, and we look forward to seeing everybody again soon. Thank you.